Good afternoon, everyone. I want to take the time now to introduce our keynote speaker. We're delighted to have Mark Fava join us today as our keynote luncheon speaker. Mark is well known in the aviation legal community, having been a part of it for many years. He has served as the Chief Operations Attorney for Delta Airlines, a job he began shortly before 9/11, so was probably not everything he thought it was going to be when he took the job. Before joining Boeing, he led an aviation law practice at a major law firm. Mark served in the Navy as a naval flight officer and mission commander in the P-3, retiring in 2015 from the Navy Reserve with over 30 years of service. Thank you for your service, Mark. Mark joined Boeing in 2010 as Chief Counsel for Engineering, Regulatory, and South Carolina Operations. In 2022, he took on his role as ombudsperson, advising Boeing employees who hold organization designation authorization from the FAA. Mark graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and University of South Carolina School of Law. He's going to talk today about building the Dreamliner in South Carolina and a career in aviation. Please welcome Mark Fava.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon. It's such a privilege to be here. Lad, thank you to you and Sam and the board. Like many of you, I attended the first time, as Deborah mentioned, right after 9/11, and I did so because it was a job that was something that came completely unexpected. You know, I went there 41 days before 9/11. And I had to drag my wife there from Charleston, South Carolina, and convince her that it was going to be a great job. We were going to get all the benefits. It was going to be 9 to 5, and I was going to see her. And of course, as we all know, that didn't happen. So I do want to talk to you a little bit about not the stuff that's been in the news, but I'm going to talk about the fun stuff. You know, start a little bit with, and this is a great group. This is my third pitch this week, and I was considering canceling some of them because every time I open the newspaper, I was like, oh, how is this going to go? But I at least know with this audience that I know that there are some questions that can't be asked, and there is no platform to ask questions today in this one, so this is even better. I came from Pepperdine Monday with a group of law students, and that was an interesting group. They've also asked if they can replay the video and use it, and I said not until I see it, because I gave the disclaimer at the beginning. So I'm going to grab the clicker, and I'll be right back. I noticed I didn't get it on the way up. Clicker? That was my fault. Okay, thank you. Okay, always pre-flight, right? I came in and I pre-flighted early, and I was coming up this way, and I was going to get the clicker, and I realized that's not where it was. So, but look, if you would indulge me, I would, and I know I'm in a group of aviation legends here, I would love to tell you about my path to aviation law, because I know so many of you in the audience have had a similar path or what has influenced you on the way, and we'll start with that for about 15 minutes, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the Dreamliner. I've been in Charleston now 14 years. I was the first South Carolinian hired there. That was another one, being in the right place at the right time. And I'd love to share with you that beautiful plane and how I think it really is a marvel that we've been able to build it there. So we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, there it is. Look, I was growing up in Charleston, a Navy brat, didn't really know where I wanted to go to school, ended up getting a Navy ROTC scholarship at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Little known fact, at that time, the Navy ROTC group during World War II was producing more pilots than the Naval Academy and other branches of the Navy during a wartime program. So it really had a rich history of aviation there. Like many of you that might have been in ROTC, you get that summer in your sophomore year, and I got to go do a week with the Marines, a week with aviation, a week with surface warfare, and then, good God, a week undersea with the subs where the metal was actually clanking and creaking. And I very quickly decided that P3 that I was on the first time was probably the best of all those choices. So I ended up doing that by default after college. I did that for 6 years active duty. I started in Jacksonville. And, again, this is just the influence that one person can have on you. I was assigned as my ground job to be the legal officer, right? So do the non-judicial punishment. During the daytime, fly missions going all around the world, tracking Soviet submarines. How fun was that? The average age of our crew was 20-something, and we would find ourselves in Keflavik, Iceland, sitting on the watch for 2 or 3 weeks, waiting to get the launch to go pick up a Soviet submarine as it would come down around the Soviet Union, headed into the Mediterranean. That was wonderful, and at the same time, I was a legal officer doing that on the side. And then the Cold War sort of was coming to an abrupt end, so I had a chance either to go be an instructor in Jacksonville or go be an admiral's aide. And I said, wow, that could be kind of fun. Little did I know that was a little bit more than I thought it was going to be, because you're up before the admiral every morning and you're back much later, and every detail, sort of like flying, every detail has to be right, or else the admiral looks to you and says, what went wrong today? But worked for a wonderful boss, and actually learned a bunch of lessons about that. And he came to me and said, I got a great follow-on job for you. You're going to be assistant navigator on an aircraft carrier. And I was like, oh boy, that was a plum job at the time for an aviator of my ilk. But I knew at the time I wanted to go to law school. So that's when I transitioned. I went to the University of South Carolina Law School. I switched over, stayed in the reserves for 24 more years, and actually ended up commanding a P3 squadron. People would say, why didn't you become a JAG? I said, why would I become a JAG? I was doing that Monday through Friday, right, Tim? There's nothing better than to go on the weekend, go back with the colleagues, all of whom were flying for American or Delta or whatever, lawyers, realtors, consultants, and we would just get together on the weekend and fly. And then it got to the period which was much more than 1 weekend a month. We were doing 2 weekends a month. And then, I was at a big law firm, got the call to go to Delta. I remember a buddy of mine from high school said, hey, you got to come work for this wonderful airline. I was close to making partner. I was doing wonderful, but I just couldn't break into this aviation law practice, right? I had clerked in Charleston. I had done automobile defense work. I had done, believe it or not, I did CSX defense work, even against my law school classmate, Alec Murdaugh, in Hampton County. See the jaws drop there. That's plenty of other stories in the bar, and how you settle a case in Hampton County against Alec. Everything you see in Netflix is true. But anyway, but I couldn't break into aviation law. So like, all right, Delta said, why don't you come be the operations attorney? I said, nope, just bought a lot, got a house, got a baby on the way. Wife will never do it. And they said, well, why don't you just come interview with us? I said, okay, I'll go do that. Don't want to upset them. So I got on the plane. They flew me first class. They told me how wonderful it was to be the in-house attorney. Flight benefits for my family. I could finally be an aviation lawyer. And I went back to my wife, and I walked through the door, and I never will forget this. Those of us that have spouses or significant others, she looked at me and said, what? And I said, we need to go to Atlanta. And she says, there's no we in this. I'm staying in Charleston. So I commuted, no kidding, for about the first 6 months, ended up going there, and that was 41 days before 9/11. And when 9/11 happened, I never will forget it, because I was in one of those residence inn hotels by myself without my wife, watching the whole thing go down. We were actually at a conference in the Renaissance Hotel, which is one of my favorite hotels at Atlanta, because it cascades down on the runway, and you can actually see the planes coming and going. But she did come with me, and we stuck it out there for about 3 years. She tapped me on the shoulder in the middle of the night one night and said, I'm going back. And then I said, well, I'm going to work in a few hours. Can we talk about this later? That didn't go over well, but we did go back, and we went back to Charleston, where I was very fortunate to go back to the same firm from whence I came. This is the Nelson Mullins Don't Ever Burn Bridges story, right? They had a D.C. office. They just opened the D.C. office. I was able to get admitted in D.C. and then go back and forth to D.C. to continue with the regulatory work along with the liability work, and all the people from the airlines and the air carriers that I had the great fortune of meeting during 9/11 then became my clients, pretty much in the Southeast, which was phenomenal. And that's when a gentleman named Charles Tarpley called me up and said, if you want to be a real aviation lawyer, you got to come to SMU, Mark. And I did. I started coming, and that's why coming back is just so neat, thinking of Charles with that influence on me. And I do remember the first time I actually spoke here, I got the 3 o'clock position on Friday afternoon. So at least I'm back to 12 o'clock, and thank you for being here. Okay. I'm sitting in Charleston in 2009, 2010. I just made partner, and there's noise that Boeing might be buying out the 2 suppliers that are in our town, making component sections for the 787. And I thought, boy, wouldn't that be neat? At the time, there were only 2 aviation lawyers in the state of South Carolina, right? Not DC, not New York, not Texas. We only had 2, and I was one of them. The other one was a U.S. Airways pilot. But I said, how do I get that job? And that's really what I want to talk about next. I was very fortunate to get the job after interviewing for months, 3 months with Mike Ludig, who had left the Fourth Circuit. As you might know, Mike, Judge Ludig, as we call him, is very vocal in the press because he's the actual one that wrote the Pence letter that told the president, or the former president, who might be the next president, that you can't overrule an election, that the vice president can't. Mike Ludig did that, and at that time, he was the general counsel. On the 3rd interview, I'd put on my suit in downtown Charleston. I'd walk down. Everybody's looking at me. Hey, where are you going today, Fava? You got an interview? And I was like, oh, yeah, well, I did. I was going to interview for the 3rd time with the general counsel who had flown in just to talk with me. And I never will forget it. I'm getting very frustrated because this is the 3rd interview. This was his baby. He had convinced the board of directors that we needed geographic diversity, and the best way to do that was to build in South Carolina. And the board told him, if you're going to do that, go down there and make it happen. So the lawyers put that deal together and the plan together with all the incentives. And, on that 3rd interview, he looks at me and he says, Mark, he says, Delta is big and the Navy is big. He says, but nothing's as big as Boeing. And he says, and I don't know why I would hire somebody from South Carolina when I got all these former Supreme Court law clerks working for me. Now, if you know the judge, that's exactly how he talks. And I was like, are you kidding me? And I'm thinking in my head, I'm sitting in this hotel room with this big sofa and just me and him. It's kind of, as my daughters would say, awkward. And he looks at me and he says, I just don't know if you're the guy for the job. And I'm like going, oh, God, here we go. So I'd gotten all the books from Barnes & Noble. I hadn't interviewed in years. And I just looked at him and I said, Judge, you know what? I don't know if I really want this job. And I was like, okay, let's see how that lands. And it got real quiet in the room, and he looks at me and he says, okay. And that was it. I walked out the door. The corporate security guy was there. I said, see you later. Went back to the law firm, went home to my wife. How'd the interview go? It went pretty well. What'd you tell him? Well, I told him I didn't know if I want the job. You did what? This is your dream job. 3 weeks later, no kidding, he calls me up. Look, Mark, I'm getting on a plane in California. What do we need to do to close this deal? I was like, well, I want this, 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 and this. And my mom, God bless her, she passed away last year, but she used to say, good Southern lady from Mississippi, give them hell, Mark. You tell them you want this, 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 and this, and you stick to it. And I was like, Mom, I don't think I can do that. You better do that. You better do that. And I did, and he said, okay. It was that easy. When are you going to come? So it was weeks later, I leave the law firm, I go there, and we start what was an incredible 3-year journey, taking what was, in fact, an old phosphate mine with a groundbreaking in 2009, building a factory that was 2.5 football fields in volume, thousands of pounds of steel, and beginning production while we're training people that have never built a plane before, buying 2 suppliers, Vought and Global Aeronautica, who were there. And then within 3 years, we flew a plane, which was absolutely phenomenal and quite historical. And I used to have a good friend who would tell me, Mark, it's not easy making history. And it really wasn't. It was very tough, but it was great to be there. If you could go next. I'm trying the clicker and it's not working. Yeah. I'm doing real firm. There we go. Okay, so that's where we started. I mean, that's an overhead shot of everything there that's trees is the old phosphate mine of about 30 years ago, a bunch of pine trees. The land had been there for quite a while, 50 or 60 years. Nobody wanted it. Nobody could build on it. It was swampy. There were alligators in there. It was a mushy soil that the engineers said nothing can support, no building can be built here. You'll see there the 2 buildings that were already there were our aft body and mid-body building, and they were not, quite honestly, I can say this now, they weren't performing, so we decided to buy them and then move in there. That decision was made in the fall of 2010, and I was there fall of 2009, I was there shortly thereafter. Same thing. I'm going to get you to go next. Okay, so there's what it looked like. We started clearing the land. Over 150 acres were cleared. 2,100 tons of trees were pulled out of there. And we actually had tractors getting stuck. I mean, it was just that muddy. But it was around-the-clock operations. To get the soil proper, if we have a soil engineer here, I've deposed one before, but this was just fascinating to me. We had to dig out 10 to 15 feet of 150 acres of bad dirt and bring in good dirt, which was just unbelievable. We made a dirt mining gentleman in South Carolina a millionaire. There were times when there were 40 or 50 dump trucks coming into the site around the clock, and we did that for over the 150 acres. Okay, go next, please. I didn't know this at the time, but those who do construction law, there's this wonderful ceremony called the topping out ceremony. It's a Scandinavian ceremony. You're supposed to raise a pine tree at the top of the factory when you put up the last beam, and you do that because you're taking care of potentially the previous spirits that were there and you've taken their home. But that's a tradition that continues with big construction firms. And we were doing this in South Carolina, and they said, well, we don't know where to get a pine tree in South Carolina. In the summertime, I said, we're not using a pine tree. And I'm the only person from Charleston. Everybody else and all the leadership had come from Seattle. I said, we're not using a pine tree. We're going to use a palmetto tree. And that's exactly what we did. So we did the topping out ceremony with the palmetto tree. And the neat thing is, again, trying to build a teamwork with the company, we had all the original employees out there with a Sharpie, probably 40 or 50 Sharpies, signing that last beam. So somewhere in that factory, that last beam that went up to the top of the factory, my name is proudly on there, along with probably the first initial 100 employees that we had hired to get going. Good. Again, there's some of the reference point I talked about, but just a tremendous amount of concrete, water system that, we get a lot of thunderstorms there that takes all that water, puts it in retention ponds, and then we'll keep going. One more. There we go. And there's the rollout. There's the actual first plane that rolled out of the factory, again, some 3 years after we'd started. It was a momentous day because you can recall there was a little bit of dichotomy between Charleston and Seattle. Right after I got the job, I'd asked the general counsel, I'm getting ready to leave the law firm. Is there anything else I need to know? Sort of doing my due diligence after I've been so brash about demanding everything I wanted and needed in the job. And he told me no. And then 30 days later, he calls me up and says, I've got something to tell you. And I was like, okay, what is that? He goes, well, we've got this little thing called the NLRB, and they just filed an action to close the South Carolina site. I said, well, wouldn't that kind of been nice to tell me that a month or two ago? And we went through that entire action. If you might remember, it became incredibly political with Leif Solomon at the board, did file the action. It got very hot because it was in a presidential election, and it was fairly significant. But we've survived that. In spite of that, and in spite of a little bit of acrimony territorially between us and Seattle, not the employees, but more so just that banter back and forth. I remember seeing cartoons in the Seattle Puget Sound Business Journal where it said, manufacturing the 787 in South Carolina. It had two wings on a plane. They were upside down. It had a hillbilly on one wing with a corn cob pipe, and it had an outhouse on the other wing. That was what they thought of us. And I said, okay, this is sort of like Locker Room. We're going to take that cartoon, hang it up on the top, and we're going to prove everybody wrong. And I think that's what we did. Okay. This is really neat. So by the time the plane flies, I'd been there 3 years. I'd actually survived. I'd kept my job. I then had a desk. I'd moved into the factory. And the guy standing right next to me is an MIT engineer. He's like, what in the world is the lawyer getting so excited about? I was incredibly excited because in my hometown, we had finally done what everybody said couldn't be done. And it was just a very proud moment. This was the first 787-9 flight. It was interesting because, in Seattle, you can line up everybody on the runway from the factory, and you can actually see the planes take off. We didn't have that advantage with the positioning of the factory in Charleston, so they put up a couple of big jumbotrons. So you actually see the lady behind me. She's actually looking towards the opening of the factory, hoping to catch the plane as it rolls out, and I'm looking at one of the jumbotrons. Okay, this is great. This is South Carolina, right? So the boss, Mike Ludig, calls me, and he's always would call me. I mean, I love the judge, but he calls a lot. And he would say, how did it go? And I said, Judge, it went great. Are we above the fold or below the fold? And I'm like, well, Judge, for those of us that read print paper, it's nice to be above the fold if it's something huge and momentous. Well, that wasn't South Carolina. We were right on we're right on the fold, and the controversy is whether or not they can bring alcohol in the county jail. And he was like, you got to be kidding me. But gosh, God bless it. That's my home state, and it's a newspaper I have to this day, signed by both the pilots and the chairman of the company at the time. Okay. That's what it looks like today. And to put everything in perspective, in the top corner of the slide, that's our international airport. So thank you. It's the middle with the dark panels on top, that's our final assembly building. That's the one that's 10.5 acre football fields. The other two are the mid-body and aft-body facility where we make the barrels for the plane that roll over. And then down in the very bottom of the field is our paint facility. So we do everything. We call it from freezer to flight. We start with carbon fiber tape that's about this big on a bunch of spools that come out of a freezer. They're wound on a big mandrel. They go into a big autoclave where they're heated up, and that carbon fiber tape melts to become the composite, which is about this thick. Incredibly durable and just a wonderful material for aircraft. We've done it for so many years in the military, but this is the first time we actually did it on a large dual-aisle commercial airplane. We'll need you again. Thank you. Okay. The site's incredible. This is another wonderful Ludig story, and I tell this in the comfort and closed door area here. We're driving back from a wonderful lunch meal at Chick-fil-A. He's getting ready to go on the corporate jet back to Chicago, and we're driving up that road to the left of the factory, and he says, who owns all that land on the other side? I said, Judge, I don't know. I think it's the airport. I think it's the FAA. No one's going to, there was also at that time a rental park there, a trailer park where people's homes were there. And he looks at me and he says, we need to get it. And this is like 3 years into the job. We hadn't even barely finished building airplanes. And I started to learn about how visionary he was as a leader, because he knew that land around airports, you just couldn't find it. I mean, you can't find land around airports. This land had been sitting there. It was across the street from our factory, another 200 acres. So we started negotiations with environmentalists, locals, the state, and everybody else, all confidential, to acquire that property, and we were able to do so. So I have no idea what'll go there. I just can tell you, if we ever wanted to put something else there, we could do so. Okay, go next. All right, let's talk about the plane. Go ahead. Okay. It is an incredible marvel of global manufacturing. If you look at the different colors, they represent a different country. So the biggest components, the nose section comes in from Wichita, built by Spirit. It's absolutely phenomenal because it actually comes in to our pilots with the cockpit already put together. Everything in the nose section is done. Cockpit is done, seats are done, and it's sealed off. We build the mid-body section. We stuff it in Charleston. It is actually built in Grottaglia, Italy, the middle section. And the tail section, which is the 47, 48 section in the very end, is actually built start to finish in South Carolina. We then, wings are from Japan, engines from Rolls-Royce, slats and flaps from Australia. All of that converges into Charleston now to make the 787 in our final assembly factory. And how does it get there? This is a fascinating engineering feat. This is our Dream Lifter. To this day, when I'm driving on the highway with my daughters and the Dream Lifter flies over, we have 4 of them that fly around the clock, I still look up and say, look, it's the Dream Lifter. And they, they're rolling their eyes. Dad, you've seen it 100 times. It's not that big of a deal. I said, no, it's a really big deal. And let me tell you why, because it's a 747 that a couple of Boeing engineers decided, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we took a 747, we zippered the top open, we made it a lot bigger, we then took the aft threshold, pressure bulkhead, moved it all the way up against the cockpit, we cut the tail off, we put a big hinge on the tail, and you could roll the parts and the components on and off this plane. I mean, this started just as a couple of Boeing engineers designing something, might have been in a bar on the back of a napkin, but how cool is that, right? And that's how the Dream Lifter came about. We take all the major sections there. This is a slide I'm really proud of. That's an iPhone photo that I took at an air show. How about that? It's pretty good, huh? It's pretty fancy. And of course, my daughter was there, and I said, you're going to stand here while I take this picture of the Dream Lifter. So go ahead and go next. They're let's see, that's, let me see which one that is. Yeah, that's a nose body section. So you can see the tail is cracked. The aft of the aircraft is this huge cavernous thing, unpressurized. And when you're in there with the tail closed, you can actually look up and see the holes in the hinges. It's absolutely fascinating. Not clear for passenger flight, obviously, and only the pilots are in the cockpit section. Flown by Atlas on a contract with us. Okay, go next. There are the wings coming in from Japan. I had a wonderful opportunity to go there last year on an 87. It was my first 87 flight. It was absolutely phenomenal, and it was just incredible to see the facility. I got there. We have two what we call heavy industry suppliers there, KHI and MHI, Kawasaki Heavy Industries and Mitsubishi. And I'm in this factory, and some of our Boeing factories look old, but this factory looked very clean, but very old. And they said, Mr. Fava, do you know what was built here? You know, very, very humble, very, very polite. And I said, no, what? And they said, the Japanese Zero. I was like, wow, this is so cool, you know? And I went home and told everybody I was there in the factory where the Zero was built. How neat was that? Go ahead and go next. This is two nose sections. So it can take two nose sections going into the Dream Lifter at Wichita. And next. And that's what the inside of the factory looks, right? So you can see all the major components coming in the back there. That's called position 0, the very beginning, where you see the aft body, the mid-body section from Italy, the nose, and then as it moves down in the stages of the assembly, we end up coming out with a Dream Lifter that's not yet painted. We now are doing it with two dual lines, and the interesting thing is, you'll see right here, that's the value of the aircraft, right? Everything you see there in blue is the composite structure. Incredibly light, incredibly durable, lower maintenance costs. If you've been on the plane, the windows are about this big, no kidding. I mean, get a window seat if you can, because they're huge, they're electronically controlled with the dimmers. And the reason we're able to do that is because it's not metal. There's no metal fatigue, right? There's a composite there. You will see that we retain metal at some of the more significant places around the nose to body, wing to body join, and some around the engines, but that's the value statement of the plane. And every time I meet either customers or pilots, and I know we've got one here in the audience, they tell me just how much they love the plane. Customers say as long as that aircraft is in the air flying, they say they're printing money. That's how efficient it is. Okay, next. And I've talked a little bit about that. We also have a tremendous flexibility with the configuration and the flying. You know, with the lighter weight comes as we know in this room, comes lighter landing less landing fees, and much more durability in the long term. Okay, next. And this is another incredible engineering feat. So we started with the 787-8. That was the first plane we built in Charleston. A little bit of a smaller plane. Of course, like anything we do in the aviation industry, how do we make it bigger, better, and more efficient? The airlines want more passengers. They want more cargo bay capacity. And that's exactly what we did with the Dash 9. We have more Dash 9s on order than any other aircraft. But again, another tribute to the engineering accomplishments. If you look at the plane, the yellow sections are where the aircraft has been stretched. The Dash 8 had 242 passengers. We increased that passenger load to the Dash 9 up to 280 passengers. We also, you would think, if you increase the weight and increase the passengers, you know, dummy me, poli-sci major would say, increase the length, increase the passengers. I would think the range would go down, and it went just the opposite. So we got an increase in the range on the Dash 9 in spite of the fact that we increased the size of the aircraft. And then I think the most beautiful is the Dash 10. It's a very, very sleek aircraft, very, very long, and we're up to 330 passengers on it. Okay, next. And there she is. That's the Dash 10, made exclusively in Charleston. We got to a point, we used to build them both in Everett, Washington, and in Charleston. We could only build the Dash 10 in Charleston because the fuselage sections would no longer fit in the Dream Lifter. So we started doing Dash 10 exclusively in Charleston. Pre-COVID, we were up to 14 a month, 7 in Washington State, 7 in Charleston, which is pretty amazing. If you look at the book value of the planes in excess of $200 million, it's always great to see one of those delivered, because I'll see some announcement about some big economic development thing in Charleston with, $50 million in investment and 700 jobs, and I'll think that's great. But every time we deliver a plane, over $200 million investment and 7,000 to 8,000 employees at the time, which is phenomenal. Okay. Most of our customers, probably 80 or 90% of them are international. So you'll see that's our flight line. It's right close to a delivery center. The delivery center is a building across from the factory where we line up the planes and they have their final checks. If everything goes well, they'll usually do one flight. Everything else will be ground test. One flight, no squawks that they need to fly again, and the plane will be hopefully delivered. And there she is also flying. I love this picture because the composite nature of the wings, if you look at them, and if you're at a window seat, when the plane is flying, the wings are actually about 25 feet, wing tips are about 25 feet higher than the tip of the fuselage. As the plane lands, the load comes off the wings and the composite flat back down, and that's where it gets its incredible efficiency. Okay, next. I always, this is Family Day. We've done a real good job of getting people out there, and we do it once a year. I surely did miss it during COVID. We do have a huge order from United, was a couple months ago, big ceremony, maybe even last year. I'm losing track of time. They've ordered over 100. If you order one now, you're going to be in line probably 2 or 3 years before we can get it to you just because of the production. And the supply chain, based on COVID, like everybody else, has been struggling to ramp back up to the rate that we'd like to be at. Right now, I think the published rate is around 5 a month. And that's it. That's my youngest daughter. I often say that I hope my dreams are for her that she will fly on that plane much more than I ever will. And she doesn't roll her eyes when I say that. She says, "When do I get to fly on it?" And I say, "Not yet." And when you do fly on it, you're not going in first class. But that's it. I again want to thank you for your time and for being here on Friday for lunch. You can go to the next one. I obviously am very passionate about aviation, as you are in this room. I'm honored to be here and to work for the Boeing company, and really having fun in my new job, which has challenges in and of itself. But thank you for being here, and thank you for your support. And I hope when someone says something that might be a little bit adverse about the company, you'll say, "Well, wait a minute. Let me tell you how that's done, and let me tell you who I heard talk about this." And love to join with you on LinkedIn. I'm no longer in the law department, so I'm now in the safety department as an ombuds person, which is a job that came up out of our 737 MAX litigation, but thankfully the board was well on board with it. I report to the board of directors twice a year, and my responsibilities are for our FAA employees around the world, which has just been fascinating to be able to use those legal skills and the engineering that I've learned. And having not being in the law department technically, I can be a little bit more freer about what I can post on social media. But haters still pop up. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.